Clowns have been a staple in horror for decades, from real-life serial killers donning the makeup to countless works of fiction using clowns as a catalyst of terror. But do we have a new clown joining the ranks of Art and Pennywise and many others? That is what I intended to find out when I picked up the book Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. And just a heads up, I will be diving into the story a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible because I do think the best way to enjoy this would be to actually read the book yourself. So I'll talk about a couple plot points, but nothing that's going to ruin the story for you. With that, let's get into it. Quinn Maybrook and her dad Glenn moved to a small town of Kettle Springs after living in the much more bustling city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Quinn's dad had gotten a job offer to become basically the new town doctor. And after dealing with the death of Quinn's mother / Glenn's wife, due to an overdose, they both kind of saw this as a fresh start. Glenn had also been working as a ER doctor in a bustling city, so that kind of comes with its own barrage of stresses, as you could probably imagine. So this seemed like a nice fresh of breath air for them. Though Quinn wasn't super excited to be leaving all of her friends in Philadelphia behind, she was still trying to be as positive and strong for her dad as possible, and for herself. She kind of knew deep down that this was probably going to be good for her as well. And the passing of her mom was hard on both of them, not just her. So they enter the new house, and after looking out her bedroom window, she notices that not only the house, but the whole town seems to be surrounded by cornfields. And outside of her bedroom window in particular, there's the remains of a burnt down factory. And she can make out the remnants of a painting of a clown on the side of the factory as well. We later learned that this clown is called Frendo. After noticing the factory and the clown's mural, she ends up noticing her dad talking to the new neighbor boy before she has a chance to, and kind of freaks out about that a little bit. But she ends up walking with the neighbor boy, who we find out is named Rust, to school the next day. And he seems more country than what she's used to, but pretty friendly, so she decides that, he's cool. The same, however, cannot be said for everyone that she meets at her new school. For instance, the, secretary that helps her get her new schedule comes off as pretty rude almost immediately, but she does see this punk girl named Ginger, who helps her get her locker open. She seems pretty friendly. And when she enters in her first class a little bit late, the teacher, Mr. Vern, is just going off on a group of students in there. At first, she starts to sympathize with him a little bit, but then she kind of comes to the realization that this dude is really overreacting at these students for having a quiz dropped on them that they were really unprepared for. And like I said, this guy is just going off. He ends up banning them from this thing called Founders Day, which apparently is a huge event in Kettle Springs. And Quinn, who is kind of nervous, starts to giggle out of that nervousness, uncontrollably, not hysterically, just kind of can't keep it contained. So she's yeah, and he also goes off on her, and as he's sending all the kids out that he was yelling at to in-school suspension, throws her along with it. So great start to the first day, right? Anyway, she follows the kids out the door to the ISS room, and this is how she gets to know this gang, for a lack of a better term, or clique, or whatever you want to call them. They include Janet, who seems to have a natural leadership role, though she's not seen as the head of the crop. She is kind of preppy, but not total mean girls. Then there's Ronnie, who is very mean girls. Tucker, a large jock kid. And right-hand man to Cole, a tired-looking, skinnier kid who seems to fit in with the jocks pretty well, but kind of gives off more of an emo kid vibe. Quinn kind of thinks he's cute, I guess, but so does a lot of the other girls in school. She actually noticed Cole before because when Ginger, the punk girl, was helping her open her locker, Cole walked in with Tucker at his side, and everybody either stops and stares at Cole or tries not to look at him, because it turns out as he is the kid who set the factory outside of Quinn's window on fire. Apparently, his family owns it, and he has kind of been taking the heat for about a year because there was a tragedy in his family. His younger sister had accidentally fallen to her death after trying to jump into a lake. It's kind of a long story. It's like the first chapter of the book, but basically there's like a party going on with a bunch of kids at the lake, and he's, I guess, supposed to be watching her, if they're even supposed to be there at all. But he was recording a video, being a social media star, at least in this small town's eyes. He was doing a live stream, and in the background of the live stream, you can see his younger sister getting ready to jump off this big cliff that a bunch of other people have been jumping off of, but she's also drunk, and I think this is the first time she's ever drank. She jumps off, hits her head or something, and then passes away. And Cole's been kind of taking the heat for that ever since, and I guess the stress was getting to him, and they went to go make another video where he sets the factory on fire. His family also is the creator of Frendo the Clown. His grandpa had made him as a factory mascot back in the day, and since the factory brings in so much money for the town kind of adopted it as its own unofficial mascot. So the clown's all over the place at this point. And let me tell you, the townspeople are not happy that Cole is doing this kind of thing. And Cole's not that into social media as much as he used to be either. It's been hard on him too. Like, he lost his little sister. He didn't mean for that to happen. It's just that everyone's kind of pointing the finger at him, which makes the situation even harder for him. But his other classmates do kind of still want to be social media stars or influencers or whatever. So the kids end up saying that they're going to go to Founders Day anyway, even if the teacher did ban them, because he's not like the law or anything. So they're just going to go. And they kind of just like rope Quinn into their own little gang as well. And she's still kind of nervous about it, but at least she has friends now, I guess. Anyway, she's telling her dad all about this later at a cafe, and that's when the sheriff of the town, Sheriff Dune, comes in to sit down. Now, her dad is going around introducing himself to everyone as the new doctor, and then the sheriff comes over to introduce himself to Glenn, but even though he's friendly, there's like this air of intimidation about him, which I guess is to be expected with the sheriff. But it really comes through whenever Quinn notices Janet, Ronnie, and another guy who we haven't met yet, who turns out to be Matt / Ronnie's boyfriend, come walking to the cafe. When the sheriff sees this, he gets up and stands in front of the door, basically blocking them from coming in. And the air in the restaurant gets very tense at this point. Quinn says she even maybe thinks he saw the sheriff reach for his gun, or put his hand on it or something. And at this, the three other kids turn and walk away, and the whole restaurant, who by the way is kind of full of like older people, just breathes a sigh of relief. And the waitress even comes over to the sheriff and says thank you for not letting them in here. So clearly there's like this divide between the older generation of Kettle Springs and the younger ones. The older generation loves their traditional ways of living and kind of help build the town, and they hate how the newer generation seems to be so absorbed in social media and internet culture. And maybe it wouldn't be so bad if the kids weren't pulling pranks and doing videos all the time that go from slight annoyances to tragedies, like with Cole's sister, or the factory burn that was the main source of income for the town. All this comes to a head, however, when Founders Day is ruined by a giant flaming ear of corn. That makes sense when you're reading the story, I promise. And there's like this whole town meeting, and what do you know? A freaking homicidal clown goes around and just starts killing people after this point. And he's dressed as Frendo the Clown, the town's mascot. So on top of everything I just told you, the town is now facing a massacre at the hands of its beloved mascot. And Quinn, not even being 5 days into town at this point, is just caught up in the middle of it. And I know, that was a long-winded explanation without much payoff, but I don't want to ruin anything else for you from there, because this is when the story really starts to get good. And yes, if you are interested in this at all, I do highly recommend you pick up a copy of the book yourself, because there is a ton of good stuff in here, twists and turns you don't see coming, and it's a really good read. In fact, it kind of reminds me of like a Goosebumps books for adults, and I mean that in the best way possible. I love Goosebumps books, and like Fear Street and R.L. Stein, stuff like that. And this comes off as so easy to read, like those books do, and it being told mostly through the perspective of a high schooler definitely lends a hand to me comparing it to them. But I gotta say, this was an extremely fun read, and I am going to read the 2 sequels that have come out. out since then. And sometimes with books or movies, if they incorporate things like internet culture, social media, or politics, it can come off as like forced or clunky. And there are a couple moments where I do kind of feel that in this book, but for the most part, I think it executes it really well, and it does feel natural. Because the Kettle Springs is such a small town, and the people in this town are so extreme with their beliefs, whether it is the traditional ways of things or the new ways, because the older generation, you know, they basically built Kettle Springs. And then the newer generation, the internet makes their small town feel not so small. It is kind of like a drug to them, though, trying to get views and likes and everything. And to the older generation, it's to the point where it almost feels like it's spitting in their face on everything they built, which makes them antagonize the younger generation even farther. It's something you can see in the real world when people are hating severely on anything that's super left-leaning or super right-leaning without falling anywhere in the middle. And by the way, this is probably the most political you'll ever hear me talk on this show. I don't like talking about politics, but it's true. The people on the extreme ends of things are usually the loudest and get the most attention. But you'll also see some kids or even younger adults doing some really heinous things on videos or live streams, all for just like views and likes. From breaking and entering to derailing a train to straight up assault, all for the attention of strangers on the internet, whether that attention is good or bad. Now, does this mean every kid with a camera is evil? No. Does this mean every person who liked the world better before it was entirely online is evil? No. But this town being so small, tensions ran high really quickly, and when it is going into the more political side of things or social media side of things, it does feel natural when it is very extreme. And that it doesn't take you out of the book at all. Like, this book doesn't get really political. It's not saying you should believe this or you should believe this. It doesn't feel like that to me, at least. But it is a thing that is a part of the story to help move the story forward, so you can get a sense of what this town's going through. And I think it does it in a very good and natural way. Let me tell you, there are some really tense moments in this book, as well as plenty of great kills for those who are fans of the slasher genre. Like I said earlier, there's lots of great twists and turns. It'll keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time, make it hard to put down. So again, I do recommend you pick up a copy for yourself. I actually heard there's even going to be a movie for it later on this year, directed by Eli Craig, who did things like Zombieland and Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. So I have pretty high hopes that the movie will be good. And, you know, it's always fun to compare the books and movies. So, you know, there's that. Or if you just want to wait for the movie to come out, you can feel free to do that as well. But it is very good. I do recommend it. And yeah, that's about it. I don't really do a ranking system for my books or anything. I just kind of like, I like this or I don't like this. If you didn't know, I started out this channel reviewing horror novels, which is a very far cry from what I do on most videos now, which is like drawing Pokemon and different things like that. But you know, it's kind of taking the channel back to its roots. But with that all said, thanks for watching. What's your favorite evil clown story? Mine's probably the movie Clown, which I also have a review for on this channel, so definitely feel free to check that out if you want. Please hit the like button and the share button and leave a comment, any of those. It helps the channel a whole lot. And other than that, I just hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.